It started with a sound that froze the entire airport terminal, a deep, guttural bark that sliced through the steady hum of rolling luggage and muffled announcements. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every head turned toward the TSA checkpoint, because what they saw next made absolutely no sense. A massive German shepherd, wearing a police K-9 vest, had lunged forward with such force that his handler nearly lost his grip on the leash. The dog's teeth were bared, his eyes wild with something far beyond aggression. And his target? A teenage boy standing in the security line, clutching a backpack, his face pale as death. The handler shouted commands, his voice raw with urgency. Officers rushed forward, weapons drawn. Passengers screamed and scattered. But the dog wouldn't stop. He pulled harder, growling like he'd sensed a bomb. A weapon. Something catastrophic that no human could see. The boy stumbled backward, shaking his head, hands raised. "I didn't do anything," he cried. "I swear I didn't do anything." But the K-9 knew better. His instincts screamed danger. His body trembled with certainty. And when the officers finally opened that backpack, what they found inside wasn't just evidence. It was proof that this dog had just stopped something unimaginable. Something that would have destroyed countless lives. What happened next shocked the entire world. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning had begun like any other at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. The sun barely crept through the tall glass windows, casting long shadows across the polished tile floors. Travelers shuffled through the security checkpoint, half asleep, clutching coffee cups and boarding passes. The steady beep of metal detectors and the low murmur of TSA officers calling out instructions created a familiar, almost hypnotic rhythm. For most people, this was just another mundane Tuesday. But for Officer Ethan Cole and his K-9 partner Ranger, it was the beginning of something they would never forget. Ethan stood near the edge of the checkpoint, one hand resting on Ranger's back, the other holding his radio. At 34 years old, Ethan had spent nearly a decade working in law enforcement. 5 of those years had been with Ranger, a 4-year-old German shepherd with amber eyes that seemed to see straight through people. They had been through everything together: drug busts, bomb threats, searches that lasted through the night. Ranger had never failed him, not once. The dog was more than a partner. He was family. Ethan glanced down at Ranger, who sat perfectly still, his ears swiveling slightly with each passing sound. The dog's nose twitched, processing the thousands of scents that floated through the terminal. Sweat, perfume, coffee, leather, fear. Ranger could distinguish them all. He was trained to detect explosives, narcotics, even traces of certain chemicals humans couldn't name. But today, something felt different. Ethan couldn't quite put his finger on it, but Ranger's body language had shifted. The dog was tense, hyper-focused. His muscles coiled like a spring. The line moved slowly. A businessman in a gray suit placed his laptop in a bin. A young mother juggled a baby in a diaper bag. An elderly couple shuffled forward, removing their shoes. Everything appeared normal, nothing out of place. Then a teenage boy stepped into the line. He looked about 17, maybe 18. Shaggy brown hair fell across his forehead. He wore a dark hoodie, jeans torn at the knees, and scuffed sneakers. A black backpack hung from one shoulder. His eyes darted around nervously, scanning the TSA officers, the other passengers, the exit signs. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, hands shoved deep into his pockets. Ethan noticed him immediately. Not because the kid looked dangerous. Plenty of teenagers looked nervous at airports, but because Ranger noticed him. The German shepherd's ears shot forward, his body stiffening into a rigid line. His nose lifted, nostrils flaring, pulling in the scent that had caught his attention. Then came the growl. Low, almost inaudible at first, vibrating deep in Ranger's chest. Ethan felt it through the leash before he heard it. His hand tightened on the leather strap. "Easy, boy," he murmured. "What do you smell?" Ranger didn't answer, of course, but his eyes locked onto the teenager with laser focus. The dog's breathing quickened. His tail went stiff as iron. Ethan's gut twisted. He had learned to trust Ranger's instincts more than his own. If the dog sensed something, there was something. The teenager moved closer to the metal detector. A TSA officer waved him forward. "Place your bag on the belt, sir." The boy hesitated, clutching the backpack tighter. His knuckles went white. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the cool air conditioning. "Sir," the officer repeated. "Your bag, please." The boy's eyes flickered toward the exit. For a split second, Ethan saw it. The calculation, the desperate urge to run. Then the moment passed. The boy slowly slid the backpack off his shoulder and placed it on the conveyor belt. It disappeared into the X-ray machine. The officer manning the screen frowned. He leaned closer, squinting at the monitor. His hand hovered over the intercom button. That's when Ranger exploded. The dog lunged forward with such explosive force that Ethan nearly lost his footing. The leash jerked tight, burning against his palm. Ranger's bark shattered the quiet hum of the terminal. Deep, ferocious, relentless. Passengers screamed. A woman dropped her purse. A child started crying. TSA officers spun around, hands flying to their weapons. "Ranger, heel!" Ethan shouted, pulling back with all his strength. But the dog didn't stop. He strained against the leash, claws scraping the tile. His entire body focused on the teenager. The boy stumbled backward, eyes wide with terror. "I didn't do anything," he shouted, voice cracking. "I swear, I didn't do anything." But Ranger knew better. His instincts, honed by thousands of hours of training, screamed danger. His nose had caught something the machines couldn't detect. Something hidden beneath layers of fabric and deception. Something deadly. Ethan's heart pounded. He had seen Ranger alert to threats before, but never like this. Never with this level of urgency. Whatever was in that backpack, it was bad. Really bad. He grabbed his radio. "We need backup at checkpoint 3. Now." The terminal erupted into chaos. Officers surrounded the teenager, ordering him to the ground. The boy dropped to his knees, hands trembling, tears streaming down his face. The backpack sat on the conveyor belt, halfway through the X-ray machine, its contents still hidden from view. Ranger barked again, louder, more insistent. His message was clear. "Open it, check it, before it's too late." And as Ethan stared at that ordinary black backpack, he realized something terrifying. They were about to discover why Ranger had reacted with such ferocity. And when they did, nothing would ever be the same. The teenage boy knelt on the cold tile floor, his hands pressed flat against the ground, his chest heaving with panicked breaths. His face was pale, slick with sweat, eyes darting between the officers closing in around him. Above the chaos, Ranger's barks echoed like thunder, each one more desperate than the last. The German shepherd strained against the leash, his muscles trembling with urgency, his gaze never leaving the backpack still sitting on the conveyor belt. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He had to make a choice. Trust the protocol and wait for the bomb squad, or trust Ranger and act now. Every second that passed felt like a lifetime. He glanced at the TSA officer monitoring the X-ray screen. The man's face had gone ghost white. "Sir," he said, voice shaking, "you need to see this." Ethan moved quickly, keeping one hand firmly on Ranger's leash. The dog growled low, a sound that vibrated through the air like a warning siren. Ethan leaned over the monitor, his eyes scanning the grainy black and white image. At first it looked normal. Books, maybe a laptop, wires tangled near the bottom. But then he saw it, a dense rectangular shape wrapped in layers of something metallic, and beneath it, what looked like a timer. Small, digital, counting down. Ethan's blood ran cold. "Clear the area," he barked. "Everyone back. Now!" Panic rippled through the terminal. Passengers scrambled away from the checkpoint, shoving past each other in their desperation to escape. TSA officers shouted instructions, trying to maintain order, but fear had already taken hold. The boy on the ground started sobbing. "I didn't know," he cried. "I swear I didn't know what was in there." Ethan crouched beside him, his voice hard. "Who gave you that bag?" The boy shook his head violently. "A man. I don't know his name. He paid me $500 to carry it through security. He said it was just electronics." that he couldn't fly with them because of battery regulations. I thought I was just helping someone out. Ethan's jaw clenched. You were being used. The boy's sobs grew louder. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But sorry wasn't going to stop whatever was inside that backpack. Ethan stood, his mind racing. The bomb squad was at least 10 minutes out. The timer, if that's what it was, could detonate any second. They couldn't wait. Ranger barked again, sharper this time, pulling toward the backpack with renewed intensity. Ethan looked down at his partner. The dog's eyes were fierce, unwavering, filled with a certainty that no human could replicate. He's telling me something, Ethan thought. He's telling me we don't have time. He made the decision. Get me the containment unit, he ordered. A female TSA officer ran to retrieve the portable blast-resistant container used for suspicious items. It arrived seconds later, heavy and cumbersome, but strong enough to withstand a small explosion. Ethan moved carefully, his hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. He approached the conveyor belt where the backpack sat, ominous and still. Ranger followed, his body tense but controlled. The dog didn't bark now. He simply watched. His breathing synchronized with Ethan's, as if the two of them were one organism moving through the same moment of terror. Ethan reached for the backpack. His fingers brushed the fabric. It felt ordinary, just nylon and zippers. But inside, he knew, was something designed to kill. He lifted it slowly, feeling the weight, heavier than it should be. Carefully, he placed it into the containment unit and sealed the lid. The metallic clang echoed through the terminal. For a moment, everything went silent. Then Ranger barked once, a single sharp sound. Not an alert this time, a confirmation. Ethan exhaled, his hands trembling. He had done it. The immediate threat was contained, but the questions remained. Who had given the boy that bag? What was the target? And how many other people were involved? The bomb squad arrived minutes later, their heavy boots thudding against the tile. They took the containment unit and moved it to a secure location. The boy was cuffed and led away, still crying, still insisting he didn't know. The terminal remained evacuated, a ghost town of abandoned luggage and overturned coffee cups. Ethan knelt beside Ranger, running his hand through the dog's thick fur. Good boy, he whispered. You saved lives today, buddy. You saved so many lives. Ranger leaned into the touch, his tail wagging slowly, his eyes soft now. The danger had passed. But deep down, Ethan knew this wasn't over. Ranger had sensed something the machines missed, something the protocols didn't account for. And if one teenager could be manipulated into carrying a bomb, how many others were out there right now, walking through airports, train stations, schools, with no idea they were being used as weapons? The thought made Ethan's stomach turn, but he pushed it aside. Right now he had a job to do. He stood clipping Ranger's leash and walked toward the command center. They had a suspect to interrogate, a network to uncover, and a dog who had just proven, once again, that sometimes the most powerful weapon in law enforcement isn't technology. It's trust. The interrogation room was small, sterile, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The teenage boy sat hunched over a metal table, his hands cuffed in front of him, his eyes red and swollen from crying. Across from him sat Detective Lisa Monroe, a veteran investigator with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Ethan stood near the door, arms crossed, Ranger resting at his feet. The dog's presence was calming, a silent reminder that justice was being served. Detective Monroe leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. Let's start from the beginning. What's your name? The boy sniffled, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. Tyler Brennan. Okay, Tyler, tell me about the man who gave you that backpack. Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. I met him online, in a gaming chat. He said he needed help with something simple, said he'd pay me cash. I've been saving up for college, and my family doesn't have much money. I thought it was just a side gig. Detective Monroe's expression didn't change. What did he tell you to do? Tyler swallowed hard. He said he couldn't fly because he had too many electronics with lithium batteries. Something about airline regulations. He asked if I could carry them through security and hand them off to someone on the other side. He said it was legal, just inconvenient for him. And you believe that? Tyler's lip trembled. I wanted to believe it. I needed the money. Detective Monroe slid a photograph across the table. It was a grainy image pulled from airport surveillance, showing a man in a baseball cap handing Tyler the backpack outside the terminal. Do you recognize this man? Tyler stared at the photo, his hands shaking. That's him. But I never saw his face clearly. He always wore the cap and sunglasses. Detective Monroe nodded. Did he give you a name? Tyler hesitated. He said to call him Kane. Just Kane. Ethan exchanged a glance with Monroe. The name meant nothing to them yet, but it was a start. Monroe continued. Did Kane mention anyone else? Any other people involved? Tyler shook his head. No. He just said someone would meet me at the gate after I got through security. He said they'd have a sign with my name on it. Monroe leaned back, studying the boy. Tyler, do you understand what you were carrying? Tyler's voice broke. They said it was a bomb. Detective Monroe's voice hardened. Not just a bomb, a device designed to detonate in a crowded terminal. If it had gone off, dozens of people would have died. Maybe more. Tyler buried his face in his hands, his body shaking with sobs. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Ethan felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was overshadowed by anger. Ignorance didn't excuse complicity. This kid had been played, yes, but his choices had put innocent lives at risk. Monroe stood, signaling for a uniformed officer to take Tyler back to holding. We'll need a full written statement. Everything you remember about Kane. Every detail, no matter how small. Tyler nodded weakly as he was led away. When the door closed, Monroe turned to Ethan. We need to find Kane before he tries this again. Ethan nodded. Ranger found one bomb. There could be others. Monroe's jaw tightened. I'll coordinate with TSA and Homeland Security. In the meantime, I want you and Ranger sweeping every terminal in this airport. If there's another device, we need to find it now. Ethan clipped Ranger's leash and headed back into the terminal. The dog trotted beside him, alert and focused. They moved through the concourses, past nervous travelers and grim-faced security personnel. Ranger's nose twitched constantly, processing every scent, every molecule of air. They swept Terminal A, then B, then C. Nothing. Hours passed. Ethan's legs ached, his throat dry from shouting orders and answering questions. But Ranger never slowed. The dog moved with tireless determination, his loyalty unwavering. As they entered Terminal D, Ranger suddenly stopped. His ears pricked forward, his body went rigid. Ethan's pulse quickened. What is it, boy? Ranger's nose lifted, sniffing the air. Then he turned sharply, pulling Ethan toward a row of departure gates. They passed gate D12, D14, D16. Then Ranger stopped at gate D18. He sat abruptly, staring at a man sitting alone near the boarding area. The man was middle-aged, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, a duffel bag resting at his feet. He looked ordinary, unremarkable, but Ranger didn't think so. Ethan approached cautiously, his hand hovering near his sidearm. Sir, I'm going to need you to stand up slowly. The man looked up, his expression neutral. Is there a problem, officer? Ethan's eyes flicked to the duffel bag. What's in the bag? The man smiled faintly. Clothes, toiletries, the usual. Ethan didn't smile back. Open it. The man hesitated, just for a second. Then he unzipped the bag. Inside were neatly folded shirts, a shaving kit, a paperback novel. Nothing suspicious. Ethan frowned. Ranger was still sitting, still staring. The dog's instincts were never wrong. Mind if I take a closer look? Ethan asked. The man's smile faded. Do you have a warrant? Ethan's voice was cold. I have probable cause. My K-9 alerted to your bag. That's all I need. The man's jaw tightened. Fine, but you're wasting your time. Ethan knelt, running his hands through the contents of the duffel. At the bottom, beneath the clothes, his fingers brushed something hard. He pulled it out, a laptop, sealed in a plastic bag. He looked up at the man. Why is your laptop wrapped like this? The man's face went pale. It's for protection, water damage. Ethan didn't buy it. He opened the plastic bag and examined the laptop. It looked normal, but Ranger growled, low and insistent. Ethan's instincts fired. He opened the laptop. The screen was blank. He pressed the power button. Nothing. But the weight was wrong. Too heavy. He turned it over. On the back panel, barely visible, were tiny screw marks. Someone had opened this recently. Ethan's blood ran cold. He looked at the man. "You're under arrest." The man bolted. He shoved past Ethan and sprinted toward the terminal exit. Ranger launched after him, barking furiously, his powerful legs eating up the distance. Ethan ran behind, shouting into his radio. "Suspect fleeing terminal, D white male, leather jacket, heading toward the parking garage." Officers converged from every direction. The man weaved through the crowd, knocking over luggage, shoving passengers aside. But Ranger was faster. The dog leaped, his jaws clamping onto the man's jacket, pulling him down. They hit the ground hard. The man struggled, cursing, trying to kick free. But Ranger held firm, growling, his teeth locked in place. Ethan arrived seconds later, slamming his knee into the man's back and cuffing his wrists. "You're done," he growled. The man spat blood onto the tile. "You don't know what you're stopping." Ethan leaned close, his voice deadly calm. "I know exactly what I'm stopping, and so does my dog." As officers hauled the man away, Ethan knelt beside Ranger, scratching behind his ears. "You did it again, partner. You're a hero." Ranger wagged his tail, panting happily, oblivious to the lives he had just saved. But Ethan knew, and he would never forget. The man was dragged into a holding cell, his leather jacket torn, his face bruised from the fall. Officers searched him thoroughly, pulling out a burner phone, a fake ID, and a small USB drive. Detective Monroe took the laptop Ethan had confiscated and handed it to the bomb squad's tech specialist, a wiry man named David Chen, who had seen more explosive devices than anyone cared to count. David carefully opened the laptop's casing, his gloved hands moving with surgical precision. What he found inside made him go pale. It wasn't a functioning computer. The internal components had been gutted and replaced with C4 explosive, a small detonator, and a timer set to activate remotely. David looked up at Monroe, his voice tight. This was meant to be triggered by cell signal. If this guy had boarded that plane, he could have blown it out of the sky mid-flight. Monroe's expression darkened. "How much explosive are we talking about?" "Enough to bring down a commercial aircraft," David said grimly, "and enough shrapnel to kill everyone in a 50-foot radius if detonated on the ground." Ethan stood nearby, listening, his stomach twisting. Ranger had sensed it. Somehow, the dog had known. Monroe turned to him. "Your K-9 just prevented a massacre." Ethan shook his head. "Ranger did. I just followed his lead." Monroe allowed herself a faint smile. "Then you're both heroes. But we're not done yet. We need to know who this guy is working for and how many others are out there." She walked into the interrogation room where the man sat slouched in a chair, his wrists cuffed to the table. His eyes were cold, devoid of fear or remorse. Monroe sat across from him, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Let's talk about Kane." The man's lips curled into a smirk. "I don't know anyone named Kane." Monroe slid the USB drive across the table. "We pulled this from your pocket. It's encrypted, but our tech team is already cracking it. So you've got two choices. Start talking now and maybe cut yourself a deal. Or stay silent and spend the rest of your life in a supermax prison." The man leaned back, his smirk fading. "You think you stopped something? You have no idea what's coming." Monroe's eyes narrowed. "Then enlighten me." The man hesitated, calculating. Then he spoke, his voice low. "Kane isn't one person, it's a network. People who are tired of the system, tired of being controlled. We're not terrorists, we're freedom fighters." Monroe's voice was ice. "You were about to blow up a plane full of innocent people. That's not freedom, that's murder." The man's jaw tightened. "Collateral damage." Monroe slammed her hand on the table. "There is no such thing as collateral damage when it comes to human lives." The man didn't respond. Monroe leaned closer. "The boy you used, Tyler Brennan. He's 17 years old. He thought he was helping someone. You manipulated a kid to carry a bomb. How does that make you a freedom fighter?" For the first time, something flickered in the man's eyes. Not remorse, but doubt. Monroe pressed. How many others are there? How many more devices? The man's silence stretched. Then finally he spoke. 3 more. 3 more what? Monroe demanded. 3 more recruits. Carrying packages. Monroe's heart stopped. Where? The man smirked again. You'll never find them in time. Monroe stood abruptly, grabbing her radio. All units, we have multiple threats active. I need every K-9 unit in this airport mobilized now. Within minutes, the airport was locked down, every terminal sealed, every passenger rescreened. K-9 teams flooded the concourses, their dogs sniffing luggage, scanning crowds, searching for the hidden bombs that could detonate at any moment. Ethan and Ranger were assigned to Terminal E. They moved quickly, Ranger's nose working overtime, his body tense with focus. They passed gate after gate. Nothing. Then near gate E22, Ranger froze. His ears shot forward. He barked once, sharp and urgent. Ethan's pulse spiked. Show me, boy. Ranger pulled toward a young woman sitting alone, a canvas tote bag on her lap. She looked no older than 20, her eyes wide and nervous. Ethan approached carefully. Ma'am, I need you to stand up and place the bag on the ground. The woman's hands trembled. Why? What did I do? Just do it, Ethan said firmly. The woman stood, setting the bag down. Ranger sniffed it, then sat abruptly. The alert signal. Ethan's stomach dropped. He radioed for backup. We've got another one. The bomb squad arrived, carefully transporting the bag to a containment unit. Inside, they found another device, identical to the first. The woman was taken into custody, sobbing, insisting she didn't know what she was carrying. 2 down, 2 more to go. Hours passed. Teams swept every corner of the airport. Then, in Terminal F, another K-9 alerted. A middle-aged man with a briefcase. Inside, another bomb. 3 down, 1 left. Ethan's radio crackled. All units, we have a possible 4th suspect. Terminal C, Gate C9. Ethan and Ranger sprinted across the airport, dodging travelers, leaping over luggage. They reached Gate C9 just as another K-9 team closed in. A teenage girl stood near the boarding area clutching a pink backpack. She looked terrified. Officers surrounded her. The girl dropped the backpack and raised her hands. I didn't want to do this, she cried. They said they'd hurt my family if I didn't. The bomb squad moved in, securing the final device. Ethan exhaled, his legs nearly giving out. It was over. All 4 bombs had been found. All 4 carriers in custody. Not a single life lost. Monroe approached, her expression weary but relieved. You did it, she said. You and Ranger stopped a coordinated attack. Ethan looked down at his partner. Ranger sat calmly, tail wagging, tongue lolling out in a happy pant. The dog had no idea he had just saved hundreds of lives, but Ethan knew, and he would carry that knowledge with him forever. As the sun set over the airport, casting long shadows across the tarmac, Ethan knelt beside Ranger and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for being the hero I could never be. Ranger licked his face, and in that simple gesture, Ethan felt a love so pure, so unconditional, it brought tears to his eyes. Because sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes or carry badges. They walk on 4 legs, and they love us more than we could ever deserve. The media descended on Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport within hours. News vans lined the perimeter, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, their reporters jostling for position. The story spread like wildfire. K-9 stops coordinated terror plot. Hero dog saves hundreds. Police dog's instincts prevent airport massacre. Ethan watched the coverage from the precinct break room, his coffee going cold in his hands. Ranger lay at his feet, completely unbothered by the chaos swirling around him. The dog slept soundly, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. His paws twitching occasionally as he dreamed. Probably chasing rabbits, Ethan thought with a faint smile. Detective Monroe walked in, holding a tablet. You need to see this, she said, setting it on the table. Ethan leaned forward. The screen showed surveillance footage from the airport, time-stamped from earlier that day. It was the moment Ranger had first alerted to Tyler's backpack. Monroe pressed play. Ethan watched as Ranger's body language shifted. The dog's ears went forward, his nose lifted, his entire posture changed in an instant. He had known. Somehow, impossibly, he had known. Monroe paused the video. Our tech team analyzed the device they pulled from Tyler's backpack. It was shielded with materials designed to avoid detection by X-ray and chemical sensors. There's no way the machines should have caught it. Ethan stared at the screen, but Ranger did. Monroe nodded. Whatever he smelled, it wasn't just the explosive. It was something deeper. Fear, maybe? Stress hormones. The residue of whoever assembled the bomb. Dogs can detect things we don't even have names for yet. Ethan reached down, resting his hand on Ranger's head. He's always been special. Monroe's voice softened. He's more than special, Ethan. He's a miracle. She straightened, her professional demeanor returning. The Bureau wants to interview you. Homeland Security, too. They want to understand how Ranger detected what their technology missed. Ethan sighed. I'll cooperate. But I'm not putting Ranger through a media circus. He's not a show dog. He's a working dog. And after today, he deserves rest. Monroe nodded. Agreed. But you should know, there's already talk of a commendation. Maybe even a Medal of Valor for K-9 units. Ethan looked down at Ranger, still sleeping peacefully. He doesn't need a medal. He just needs to know he did his job. And he did, better than anyone could have imagined. The following days blurred together. Interviews, debriefings, reports filed in triplicate. The four suspects, Tyler, the man with the laptop, the young woman, and the teenage girl, were held without bail, facing federal terrorism charges. The investigation expanded, tracing the network back to a loose coalition of extremists who had been planning coordinated attacks across multiple airports. Kane, it turned out, wasn't a person at all. It was an alias used by several individuals working together, a hydra with many heads. But thanks to Ranger, their plan had failed. One afternoon, Ethan received a call from an unexpected source. The mother of Tyler Brennan wanted to speak with him. Ethan agreed, meeting her in a quiet conference room at the precinct. She was a small woman, her face lined with worry, her eyes red from crying. Thank you for coming, she said softly. I don't know where to start. Ethan sat across from her, his expression neutral. Your son made a terrible choice. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know, and he'll pay for it. But I wanted you to know, he's not a bad kid. He was desperate. We've been struggling financially, and he thought he was helping. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. Desperation doesn't excuse what he did. People could have died. She wiped her eyes. I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted to thank you and your dog. Because Tyler's alive, and so is everyone else. If Ranger hadn't caught that bomb, my son would have been responsible for so many deaths. He would have had to live with that forever. Ethan's throat tightened. He's getting a second chance. A lot of people don't. She nodded. I'll make sure he understands that. I'll make sure he becomes the person he should have been all along. As she left, Ethan sat alone in the conference room, staring at the table. He thought about Tyler, barely more than a kid, whose life had been derailed by greed and manipulation. He thought about the man with the laptop, whose cold eyes had shown no remorse. He thought about the young woman and the teenage girl, both terrified, both coerced. And he thought about Ranger, who had seen through all of it, who had sensed the danger hidden beneath layers of lies and fear. That night, Ethan took Ranger to the park. They walked along a quiet trail, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Ranger trotted ahead, sniffing bushes, marking territory, living in the simple joy of the moment. Ethan watched him, his heart full. You know, buddy, he said quietly, people keep calling you a hero. And they're right. But I don't think you see it that way. I think to you, it's just instinct. Just doing what you were born to do. Ranger paused, looking back at Ethan, his tail wagging. Ethan smiled. Maybe that's what heroism really is. Not seeking glory or recognition. Just doing the right thing because it's who you are. He crouched, scratching Ranger behind the ears. I'm proud of you, boy. More than I can ever say. Ranger licked his face and Ethan laughed, the sound echoing through the empty park. Weeks passed. The story faded from the headlines, replaced by new crises, new tragedies, new heroes. But for Ethan and Ranger, life returned to its familiar rhythm. Early morning shifts at the airport, long hours of patrol, quiet moments in the break room, and then one day, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Officer Ethan Cole and K-9 Ranger. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman named Sarah Mitchell. She had been scheduled to fly out of Dallas-Fort Worth on the day of the attack. Her flight had been canceled due to the lockdown. She had been furious at the time, inconvenienced, frustrated. But later, when she learned what had been prevented, she realized she owed her life to a dog she had never met. The letter was simple. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for saving my children. Thank you for being there when we needed you most. I will never forget what you and Ranger did. Ethan read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into his locker. He didn't need gratitude, but it felt good to know that somewhere out there, a mother was tucking her children into bed at night because Ranger had done his job. And that, Ethan thought, was worth everything. Months later, Ethan stood in a crowded auditorium, wearing his dress uniform, Ranger sitting calmly at his side. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Police chiefs, federal agents, and local officials gathered to honor the K-9 units who had prevented the attack. Ranger was awarded the Medal of Valor for K-9 service, the highest honor a working dog could receive. When Ethan stepped forward to accept the medal on Ranger's behalf, the room erupted in applause. Ranger, unbothered by the noise, simply wagged his tail. Ethan knelt, draping the medal's ribbon around Ranger's neck. The dog looked up at him, eyes bright, tongue lolling in a happy pant. "Good boy," Ethan whispered. "Best boy." As the applause continued, Ethan glanced around the room. He saw the faces of the people Ranger had saved, the TSA officers who had been working that day, the passengers who had been in the terminal, the families who would never know how close they had come to losing everything. And he realized something profound. Heroism wasn't about recognition. It wasn't about medals or headlines. It was about showing up every day, trusting your instincts, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. It was about loyalty, courage, and love. And no one embodied those values more than the German shepherd sitting quietly at his side. That night, Ethan took Ranger home. They sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The world felt peaceful, almost impossibly so after the chaos of the past months. Ethan ran his hand through Ranger's fur, feeling the warmth, the steady heartbeat beneath. "You know what the crazy thing is, buddy?" Ethan said softly. "People think dogs are lucky to have us. But the truth is, we're the lucky ones. We get to share our lives with creatures who love us unconditionally, who protect us without asking for anything in return, who teach us what it really means to be loyal." Ranger rested his head on Ethan's lap, eyes half closed, content. Ethan smiled. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful every single day." The stars continued to emerge, filling the sky with light, and in that quiet moment, Ethan made a promise. He would honor Ranger's courage by living every day with the same integrity, the same dedication, the same unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Because if a dog could be that brave, that selfless, then surely a human could try to be the same. Before we go, I want to remind you to hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss another incredible tale. These stories matter. They remind us of the goodness in the world, the heroes who walk among us, often on four legs, and the bonds that make life worth living. As the night deepened, Ethan and Ranger sat together, two souls united by purpose and love. The airport attack had been prevented. Lives had been saved. Justice had been served. But more than that, a truth had been revealed. The truth that sometimes the greatest protectors don't carry guns or wear badges. They have fur and tails and hearts so pure that they shame the rest of us. They remind us what we could be if we loved as fiercely, as loyally, as completely as they do. And so, as the stars wheeled overhead and the world slept peacefully, unaware of how close it had come to tragedy, Ethan whispered one final truth into the night. Thank you, Ranger. Thank you for being my partner, my protector, my friend. Thank you for showing me that heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about being brave despite the fear. It's about standing between danger and the innocent, even when no one is watching, even when no one will ever know. Ranger's tail thumped softly against the porch, and Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he had been heard, because dogs always listen. They always understand, and they never ever let us down. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they have four paws, a wagging tail, and a heart big enough to save the world.